Welcome to everyone to this conversation today about what the Biden administration and Congress can accomplish within the first 100 days to promote climate smart agriculture across the country. I am Deb Atwood. I am your moderator today. I serve as the executive director of AGree, which is a bipartisan initiative to transform food and agriculture policy. AGree is housed at the Meridian Institute office in Washington, D.C., and I'm joining you from my guest bedroom and office in Glover Park. Currently, AGree has two streams of work under its platform: the Economic and Environmental Risk Coalition, which has created a bridge between positive environmental outcomes and profitability for farmers and ranchers, as well as the Climate, Food, and Ag Dialogue, which includes our producers, supply chain leaders, and civil society organizations working together to promote federal action on climate. We're excited to hear from our bipartisan panel of policy experts about how the administration and Congress are thinking about promoting climate smart agriculture, and we're really pleased to have you. Thank you. But first, we thought it would be important to start the conversation by hearing from one of our farmers on the ground about what she does and what it takes to implement conservation practices on her operation. Kristin Duncanson, who is an owner and partner with her husband of Highland Family Farms in Minnesota, and a member of both the AGree Economic and Environmental Risk Coalition and the Climate, Food, and Agriculture Dialogue, will just say a little bit about her place. She has braved harsh winter weather to share her thoughts, and she's a friend and farmer leader in conservation. So with that, let's turn on the video. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kristin Duncanson, and my husband and I own Highland Family Farms in south central Minnesota. That field behind me today, which has now got ice and snow on it, also has a cover crop. It happens to be cereal rye, which for us on our farm has worked fairly well as we've experimented with how to make cover crops work for us. We know that cover crops come at a cost, but we also know that the benefits of putting them out there and trying them are worth it. We've got the opportunity to reduce some erosion, to build our soil health, and to really look at what our soil capacity is once we've got that cover crop down. It's not without trial and error though. And one of the things that we've come to know about conservation is in order to get more farmers to adopt it, we've got to be able to look at what the incentives are, what data is available to show what is an effective practice on someone's particular farm. Not all farms are created equal. There's differences in soil types, methodology, water. All those things come into play when we're trying to get adoption of conservation. Over the last 10 years at Meridian, we've been able to really do a deep dive into what would be needed to get more producers and ranchers to adopt cover crops, soil practices, conservation work across the country. I'm pleased that today we'll have three great speakers. Anne, Lynn, and Robert come to us from a variety of experiences, and we'll be able to share what kind of opportunities they see for us as we move forward in the area of crop insurance, conservation practices, soil, carbon storage, and all those things that will be important to the future of production agriculture across this country.
So thank you, Kristin, for your work. I know you are actually on the webinar right now. And just looking at you, it reminds me of a scene out of the movie Dr. Zhivago. For those that haven't seen it, it was an Academy Award winner. But we appreciate your perspective on conservation and the on-farm dynamics we should be thinking about when we consider how to create effective incentives for conservation and climate smart agriculture. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our three panelists. Speaking first will be Robert Bonney. He's a familiar person to all of us. And at AGree, he actually was on our Climate, Food, and Ag Dialogue until he got a higher calling to first run the transition team at USDA. And of course, now we know he's Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and a Senior Advisor for Climate to the almost confirmed Secretary Vilsack at Agriculture. So before, he's got a history of working on forestry and climate smart agriculture. He's considered an expert and a leader. So thank you for joining us, Robert. Our second speaker is Ann Simmons, the Majority Staff Director for Chairman Scott of the House Agriculture Committee. And she's a well-known expert in our agriculture policy. I know we were talking earlier before we started the video, she's been on the staff since 1993, raised on a corn, soybean, and livestock farm in Iowa. And she will be, as Captain Obvious people I can be, that she will be critical in the upcoming policy discussions that are related to climate and agriculture. So thank you, Ann, for joining us. Our third speaker is Lynn Tjeerdsma. Lynn is recently retired from his position as a senior policy advisor to Senator John Thune of South Dakota. He served the Republican leader with great distinction for many years on agriculture policies. And I want to call out that Senators Thune and Klobuchar, in a very strong bipartisan way, were instrumental in supporting provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill related to improving the use of agriculture data for conservation. Lynn also has a farming operation in South Dakota and serves on the AGree Economic and Environmental Coalition. So thank you all. And the format is you will each speak for 7 to 10 minutes. And after the three of you finish speaking, we will procure questions, curate Q&As, and all of you that are listening, please go to the Q&A chat at the bottom of your panel and send us the questions. So thank you so much. And Robert, over to you.
Great, thanks, Deb. And it's great to be on a panel with Lynn and Ann today, who I've worked with in various capacities. And so good to be with them. Good to be with all of you. What I thought I'd do today is just talk about at a relatively high level, sort of how I think USDA under the Biden administration is thinking about agriculture and climate change. Obviously, President Biden has laid out some important priorities in the beginning of the administration, among those economic recovery, climate change, racial equity, obviously COVID response. And certainly for the first three of those, I think how we think about climate change policy is going to play a really important role. If you saw Secretary Vilsack at the hearing the other day, and he talked about the economic opportunities, new markets, the ability to market U.S. agricultural products for their contribution to resolving climate change. So he talked about the economic opportunities associated with doing climate change policy the right way at USDA. And so thinking about how do we reward producers for their stewardship, and how do we create incentives, voluntary incentives for them to do more? You know, and I've worked in working lands conservation for a long time, and if you think about what's actually working on working lands, it's about collaboration, it's about partnership, it's about incentives. And so I think anything we think about how do we encourage climate smart agriculture and climate smart forestry as well on working lands has to be about those things. It has to be voluntary, it has to be incentive based, it has to work for producers, has to work for their bottom lines. And so I think that's going to be a critical element of anything we do. I think another important element is making sure we get input from agriculture, from forestry. We want to do this in a collaborative way. We don't want USDA to go into a black box and come out with an answer. We want this to be a conversation, and we want to build tools that that work for agriculture and forestry, and that obviously work for the climate and for conservation as well. If you saw the president's EO on climate change, you saw some language in there about climate smart agriculture and USDA developing some work around that, reporting back on that. And we're going to, look at ways that we can interact with agriculture and forestry to do that, to make sure we get plenty of input. So more to come on that. It's also important to work, and Lynn and Ann know this very well. It's very important for us to work with members of Congress and with our two authorizing committees and with the appropriators on this as we work on climate policy. We want to make sure that we do it in a way that builds support, not only across stakeholders, but with important congressional advocates. I think it's also important that, there's a lot of interest in the private sector. You see new businesses coming up around climate and ecosystem service markets. You see a lot of interest in agriculture. So as we think about USDA policy, it's also important, I think, to think about how do we bolster that private investment. We don't want to compete with the private investment. We actually want to figure out how do you build policy in a way that invites more investment in agriculture, that gives producers more opportunities. And so I think as we think about USDA policy, that's going to be an important thing. And I think also we need to think about how do we de-risk investments in climate change. And by that I mean, if you're a producer, forest landowner, and you're being asked to make investments, whether it's cover crops or conservation tillage, or maybe it's dealing with dairy methane, or on the forestry side, new forest practices, those things have a price tag. And we need to think about how we de-risk those investments for producers. One of the for those of us who have been in kind of land-based climate policy, one of the things you hear a lot is concern about are these reductions real? You hear arguments about permanence and additionality and leakage. And so there's always been a concern about environmental uncertainty. So we have the risk that producers think about, price uncertainty, are they going to get paid back for their investments? But we also have environmental uncertainty on the other side. And so the question is, can we make investments there as well to reduce that uncertainty so that we can actually prove these actions up that producers take? So investments in science, investments in carbon inventory. How do we partner with folks, both the agencies in the department, but outside the department, to make sure that we're accountable, that we can measure these impacts, and then also we think about how do we reduce transactions costs for folks for producers and others to participate. Can we create tools? Can we create methods for them that make this easier so that conservation is less a burden and more an opportunity by keeping those transaction costs low? Equity is going to be an important piece of this. We want to build tools that work for all of agriculture, including small and medium-sized producers. We want to make sure that the tribes, Black farmers, other folks, that we build things that actually work for everybody. And so thinking about that equity lens, I think, is going to be really, really important. Resilience is obviously critically important. I've been talking a lot about, I think, mitigation, but resilience is really the flip side of the same coin. We need to help producers build more resilient agricultural systems, and the same thing on the forestry side. And for some folks in agriculture, this is going to be more valuable than maybe the mitigation opportunity for them. So thinking about how are we responsive to that, and also recognizes that if agriculture is more resilient, if it's more productive, that's important in and of itself for how you think about both climate change and the challenge of feeding 9+ billion people by mid-century. We've obviously got a lot of potential USDA authorities to take advantage of. I mean, thanks in part to Lynn and Ann, there's a great conservation title, Conservation Reserve Program, CSP, EQIP, and others where there's real opportunity there. There was some conversation from the secretary the other day about the potential of a carbon bank. Can we look at new authorities to create some new finance mechanisms and think about how do we de-risk this for agriculture? And so there's potential opportunity there. On the science side, I talked a little bit about kind of inventory and building on USDA's already really good scientific expertise there. Are there ways to think long-term about how do we get agriculture to net zero? how do we continue to think about on the forestry side markets and other approaches that can maintain the U.S. Sink on the forestry side. And then I know many folks on this are very interested in the opportunities for crop insurance. Crop insurance is actually incredibly important to agriculture as part of the safety net. Anything we do there, obviously, if there's new innovations to think about, I think there's a lot of interest there. The data work that AGree and others have been doing is critically important. And if there are opportunities there, I think there's interest. We want to make sure, obviously, that those work for production agriculture. So let me stop there. Hand it over to my co-panelists, and look forward to questions.
Great, thank you, Robert. Anne, over to you.
Cool, sounds good. And I will just echo what Deb said. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invite. And it's a lot of fun to be on the same panel with folks that I've worked with over the years, both Robert and Lynn. Look forward to continuing to work with you. Lynn, even though I know you're retired, many of us will continue to look forward to your wisdom, your expertise in the field and in DC. And I'm glad that AGree's got you as working as part of their team. So I'm also going to do a little disclaimer. The comments I'm going to make, I'm hoping to reflect Chairman Scott and where he's going to take the committee this year, but I will also add too, these are my comments, so they're not attributable to Chairman Scott. Just want to put that out there, because I know we've got some press folks listening in. But I think Deb's going to do a little disclaimer at the end as well. So again, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. I think I glossed over the 100 days part when Deb and Bev did the invite, because Robert may or may not agree with this too, but Hill policy staff, when they hear the term first 100 days, all cringe, because it means we're going to have to, try and get a lot of things out and do a lot of things and come up with things that could be done in 100 days. And as Robert is quickly finding out, and we're expecting way too much of whatever administration in their first 100 days, you're still getting boots on the ground and getting folks in the door. So I will just remind folks of that they have a good set of folks that are down at USDA already, but everyone needs to also be patient with them as they get staffed up. So again, happy to be here and want to share Chairman David Scott's interest in discussions on climate and what he intends to do this Congress. Many of you are aware that Mr. Scott has indicated his first hearing as the new chairman of the House Ag Committee will focus on what is happening with climate and weather and how that's impacting our ag producers and our food and fiber production systems. For that hearing, we'll be bringing in some scientific experts to document what's happening and how that is impacting farmers and ranchers. He'll also have a farmer witness who can speak to the role that agriculture can play. We're also expecting, as we move forward, that our various subcommittee chairs may also want to do additional hearings on this area. As was mentioned, everything from crop insurance to looking at what livestock operations are already doing in terms of climate change and mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. There's a lot of areas that all of our various subcommittees can take a look at, and hopefully our chairs will all be interested in doing that. Mr. Scott has also, he's got several other hearings which are somewhat related to this topic too, that he wants to do with the full committee. That would include looking after the climate change hearing, looking at the status of Black farmers and other farmers of color. And as Robert alluded to, that's one of the reasons why he is also wants to be very engaged in the discussion that's happening on climate change. A lot of our smaller producers, farmers of color who haven't been able to access USDA programs, haven't been able to upgrade irrigation systems, aren't as aware of the risk management tools that are out there like crop insurance and the USDA programs. They're the folks that are going to feel the brunt of this. And so that's, again, part of the reason why Chairman Scott wants to do that hearing. And it's everything will have a tie into climate change. We're also going to look at crop insurance and risk management. He's also wanting to take a look at nutrition and the state of our food security. And as folks well know, on the resiliency questions and adaptation, those are going to be questions going forward as well about how safe is our food system, how secure is our food system. Obviously, the pandemic has led to a lot of questions. We saw what can happen when something we're not expecting comes our way. And so I think we will also continue to take a look at the system resiliency as we move forward as well. It's hard to know exactly what the path is going to be in the House yet, and some folks may be disappointed that I'm not going to speculate or have a more clear path forward on what we may or may not do. But again, these are my views, my comments, and I am not going to get out in front of our members on any of this, or particularly the chairman. But again, he has indicated he very clearly wants to have the House Agriculture Committee play a major role in whatever discussions happen in regard to climate change, because our farmers and ranchers will be the most impacted, and because we're talking about food and fiber, what folks need to live and survive are going to be among the most impacted industries. We don't know exactly what vehicles will be or paths will be taken. There are a few hints, a few indicators that are out there that the House may do something this year. That would include the Speaker's continuation of the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. So we look forward again to working with them, Anna and her staff. We also know some of the other committees are looking at some of the transportation and energy infrastructure issues that are out there. The other signal that something may be contemplated is, if some of you may know, that the House rules for the 117th Congress allowed for budget points of order to be waived for climate change legislation, meaning that we could spend additional funding without having to find offsets. We at the Ag Committee obviously are hoping whatever path is taken is bipartisan, or at least as bipartisan as we can make it. That said, no matter what the path looks like, I think the House Ag Committee will continue to ask the questions that we usually ask when we're doing a farm bill, and as it pertains to the conservation or energy title. And those questions would include, is there language already in statute that would accomplish the goal that's being envisioned? Is it something that USDA can already do administratively? If that's the case, do they have money? Do they need more money to do it? A reminder that we put in what we tell everyone too is, if we stick everyone's words that they want to amend the Farm Bill conservation energy titles with, you get too many words and the language becomes unwieldy, and all of the words lose their importance. So that's another one of our basic things when we try to do legislation. We also try to remind folks as well that rulemaking and practice standards that USDA NRCS does are a lot easier to update and reflect current science and thinking, rather than waiting to amend 5 to 7 years to amend the next farm bill. So those are, again, kind of our standard things that we look at whenever we do a farm bill. And I think a lot of you are looking at this as a potential to amend our conservation title and our energy title programs, hopefully to put more money in, but potentially also to make some other tweaks. And again, I would just encourage, NRCS has practice standards out there in a lot of things, from composting to energy efficiency. Some folks may be surprised at what NRCS is already doing out there, or what NRCS will already cost share. Also, when it comes to the discussion of carbon markets and trading, I'd be amiss if I didn't suggest also a read of Section 1245. For those of you who may not have been around when we passed the 2008 Farm Bill, I like to say there are no new issues. We recycle issues. And again, those of you who were around, remember we were having obviously a similar debate 12 years ago when we were doing cap and trade legislation, and it also impacted the 2008 Farm Bill discussion. When we wrote Section 1245 in 2008, we didn't limit it to just carbon trading. We actually left it a little bit wider in case water quality or other environmental services might take off and could be covered as well. We did put an emphasis on carbon, but again, we wrote it a little bit broader. We're having the same discussion back in 2007 and 2008 that Robert alluded to about whether USDA should hold carbon credits, or whether that is something better done in conjunction with the private sector. Obviously, that issue is going to continue to be a topic of discussion. Back then in 2008, we envisioned USDA working on the science and credibility of the practices, so that farmers, ranchers, and private forest landowners didn't get left holding worthless carbon credits. So again, that will continue to be a topic of discussion. As part of our process too, in 2021, I'm hoping that we will be getting reacquainted, all of us, with the Office of Environmental Markets, which is in USDA's Office of Chief Economist. We are going to ask Bill, who runs that office and is a huge wealth of knowledge, as is Robert, about what USDA is already doing, has been doing, and could look at doing in the future. And that would be one of the basis of our first steps, is what can USDA already do? What do they need assistance in doing? and how do we need to tweak that and potentially do legislative language to help them do it better. One last issue that I would be remiss, and I know this came up at the hearing with the secretary. We've been grappling with this for over the 30 plus years that I've been working on conservation policy, is that how do we make sure we can get more conservation on the ground? Former NRCS Chief Lohr was working towards getting us back to 2,000 employees in NRCS. We're obviously hoping that the next NRCS chief will continue that and give Congress a good picture of what the workload needs actually are, so we can get adequate funding to them. And again, I'm hoping the folks that are talking about, putting more money in the conservation title realize that it's easy to say that. The hard part is making sure we've got the technical assistance to get that to money out the door and use it wisely and work with producers. I know Robert and the secretary will probably be looking at new and creative ways to expand that pool of folks beyond our NRCS employees, conservation districts, the current set of technical service providers in the private sector. And we look forward to working with them to make sure that we do address that issue. Obviously with the caveat that we're hoping it's sets of folks that farmers will listen to and will let on their farms. In closing, Chairman Scott looks forward to having the Ag Committee play a role in the discussion and the debate as the debate plays out this year. He looks forward to working with Secretary Vilsack to strengthen our Farm Bill program's role in this discussion, whether it be CRP or the cost share programs. We feel like we have a lot of the tools in place to help farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners sequester carbon, reduce that greenhouse gas emissions, and increase their energy efficiency. So, and thank you for letting me share the chairman's vision.
Well, thank you, Ann. Boy, you covered a lot of territory. So Robert, get ready. I think you'll be spending a lot of time talking to Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Thompson over the course of the next couple of years. So with that, Lynn, last but not least, we'd love to get your perspective on all of this.
Okay, well, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. And I was really pleased when I saw that Ann and Robert were going to be joining the panel. I've worked with both of them. In fact, worked with Ann since 1989 when I was an Ag LA for Senator Larry Pressler, and she was working for, at that time, Ag World for Congressman Tim Johnson. So she and I go back to probably started working together at a time when some of you watching weren't even born yet. And really, one thing I always told the young people in our staff in Senator Thune's office that, they give me a bad time about my age, but I'd say it's hard to have 25 years of experience when you're 24 years old. So there's a lot to be said for experience, and especially working on the Hill. Long experience, lengthy experience is kind of hard to come by. And Robert, you and I worked together when we were both at USDA. And for those of you who haven't worked there, it's hard to believe or hard to understand just how complex and what a huge organization and how diverse that USDA is, and what a job that is, especially like in Robert's position. But I always enjoyed working with you, your common sense approach to everything, whether it was production, agriculture, or conservation, or the environment, and glad to see that you're back there. I wrote down when I learned I was going to be on this panel, I started taking notes and thinking about different things that I'd like to share. And I know we're to focus on the first 100 days, and that's what you're focusing on now. But I also titled my notes, First 100 Days and Beyond. And I'm going to read some of these things so I don't forget or leave them out. But being a farmer myself, I know how independent farmers and ranchers are. And my first words of advice for future farm policy from Congress and implementation at USDA is allow farmers to tell you what they need and want. Don't caught up with, we know what you need, therefore you should trust us to tell us what you should do. Trust a farmer's instincts and knowledge and his familiarity with his own land. Nearly every farmer and rancher I know has a deep-seated love for the land, and although they're interested in making a living and profit from that land, and that's imperative, they're also concerned about good stewardship, sustainability for future generations. So, they're ready, willing, and able to incorporate so many things, and they already have, and there's some great practices out there, and I think there's even better ones to come to help protect the environment, protect their land. But the important thing is that be wide open to their ideas. And I want to use a program that was in the 2018 Farm Bill as an example. And it's not that I'm putting in a plug for this program, but it was one that I had worked on and did a lot of research on. And it was called the Soil Health and Income Protection Program. And I appreciate Ann's help in getting that included under the CRP title of the Farm Bill. But, and for those of you that are not familiar with it, it's basically a short-term alternative to the 10 and 15-year easements in the CRP program. So a farmer could set aside 3 to 5 years, set aside land for 3 to 5 years under a short-term program, get paid for it, and have the flexibility to hay, graze, of course, outside the primary nesting period. But when we put this program together, there were 2 critical components that were left out. And one was that the enrollee would pick and choose the land that was going to be involved, feeling that as a farmer, we feel we know, because we've operated this land probably for years, what land is the poorest producing land. The second component was, and this one I was really disappointed was left out, was the crop insurance premium on the unit in which the land was enrolled and shipped would have a reduced premium or greater subsidy, however you want to couch it. But I'd worked extensively with RMA on this component and got their buy-in on it. And I think the most, what to me was the most critical part of this was that when CBO scored the reduced premium for crop insurance by enrolling the poorest land, and you could only enroll like up to 15% was the maximum you could enroll. But anyway, there was 0 cost for that. So I think that shows the value in being able to quantify conservation. I know CBO aren't the technical experts on this, but the fact that they recognized that you could, by enrolling the poorest ground, farming the best reduces the risk, reduce the cost of crop insurance. And actually, when I was working on this at the same time, I was approached by AGree as a staffer on the ag data bill. This is what really helped show me and be able to persuade Senator Thune and get his support for the ag data bill, which he did wholeheartedly support along with Senator Klobuchar. But I think this has a lesson for future farm policy. If we provide the right tools for farmers and ranchers to run their operations in a sustainable, cost-effective, and productive manner, and let them choose how to best use these tools, they will end up protecting their land and the environment. And, you know, and it sounds simple, and I know it's a huge job to do, but there, I think is a lot of opportunity and a lot of possibilities. And that's why, for me, it's so critical as far as ag data, being able to quantify ag data. And this is something that back in several years ago, 2006 to 2008, before the 2008 Farm Bill, I was a policy initiatives manager for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. And back then we talked about being able to quantify conservation. And Ann, you had talked about being able to get more conservation practices on the ground. And I think that's going to be critical. I really feel this administration, this Congress is going to be working more and more in that direction. And I really applaud that and feel that that's so necessary, because conservation can definitely complement production agriculture. Couple other things, a few other things I wanted to mention, and these are beyond the 100 days, but I think they're good policy and things that we had worked on in the previous Farm Bill. Crop acreage bases should be updated to include only the most recent 3 to 5 years. And Senator Thune had introduced legislation to that effect, and CBO scored that as saving around $1 billion. And simply because we've got a lot of land in many states that hasn't been cropped to any commodity crop or any crop that has base acres for years, maybe decades. And yet that land is still receiving commodity payments, federal farm payments. And I know it's not a popular theory in or popular initiative, but to me, it makes very good policy. And we also talked about, and I think we're headed in that direction, conservation program should be more of a working lands program. We saw that in the last farm bill where we could have expanded haying and grazing. We can do that. I've done it on my own farm with some wetlands reserve program acres, CRP acres, where that land needs to be managed. It needs to be harvested carefully in order to make it more productive, better for wildlife, better for the land. Those are things that need to be done. Another important component I think I'd like to see you work at, especially Ann, and this is mitigating. There's a lot of permanent easements, both Fish and Wildlife Service and USDA easements that cause a lot of people a lot of heartburn. And many of those were put in place 10, 20, 30 years ago. And I think there's land out there that would probably be better suited for those easements. And we need to figure out some way we can mitigate those, let some of the land that maybe be better off being farmed, traded for land that would be much better used, putting under an easement, be more productive, better for wildlife, better for the environment. So I think there's something there that you could look at. Another thing I think that's important and I had worked on but couldn't seem to get too much traction for was better insurance for grassland and grazing lands. We know there's, we talk about sod saver and reduced insurance coverage and higher premiums for land that's native sod that's been broken out. But I think a better incentive actually would be to provide better insurance for grazing lands. I know I've had so many cattle producers, livestock producers would say, well, if I could get the kind of insurance coverage on my grassland that we can on our commodity crops, I'd be leaving the land in grass. And so that's something I think. And also another consideration, I don't really have a solution for this or an answer, but I'll keep thinking about it, is we have about half our cropland or farmland in this country is owned by absentee landlords. And somehow we need to be able to incentivize them to work with their tenants to do some conservation measures rather than just getting that dollar. And there again, it's being able to quantify the conservation, being able to show that there's a value there. And one thing that I hated to see in the last farm bill was we lowered the CRP rental rates, but we had to do that in order to expand the acres. But I think that's really hurt CRP. And, and there's a fine line there. You talk to their farmers that feel that CRP is too competitive for like beginning farmers, but I think there's a medium there. And I'll throw that in your lap, Ann, since you'll set the policy for the next farm bill. But, and I think I've even seen something, Robert, where Secretary Vilsack has mentioned he's got a desire to increase rental rates and has some authority to do that. And I think that would be really critical because especially my home state of South Dakota, where we've seen a drop in CRP acres and drop in pheasant numbers, which brings $250 million to the state, and also losing the conservation benefits. So with that, I'll close and open it up for questions. Again, thanks for both of you being here and for listening to me, and be glad, even though I'm retired, to offer my advice. It's free of charge. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Lynn and Ann and Robert. We have received lots and lots of questions, and we're doing our best to group them together. So the first set of questions that I'd like to articulate are around the carbon bank question and the CCC. We're hearing what are the farmers, what the farmers' perspective. Have you thought about it? How are you thinking about it? The business of, do you even have the administrative, or what kind of authorities do you have or will need from Ann and her colleagues in the Senate? What kind of, USDA's role in that marketplace has been asked about. Of course, the early adopters, and then details about the role of philanthropy in the private sector. I'm going to throw it all out there, folks. We've heard a lot of questions about, and people that don't have a whole lot of carbon that they're going to get credit for because of where they're located, or they're too small and disadvantaged and will never, really have a great opportunity to engage in the market. So it's a question that all of you can go after here, but let me turn to you first, Robert, and then Ann, and then Lynn.
Hey, well, I'll try and cover up a couple of those briefly. From a broad perspective, I think, I think many of you know I'm a huge fan of the conservation programs, and they do a great job and offer a lot of value for this and water quality and wildlife and a whole lot of other things. The attractiveness of thinking about something like a bank is that you can provide a flexible mechanism that will respond to the type thing that producers are doing out there, and importantly, I think provide them some more economic opportunities. However this is designed, it needs to be done in a way that's going to benefit producers, where they're actually going to see some return here. And so that, I think that flexibility matters for thinking about, are there ways to think about partnering with the private sector to essentially, as I mentioned in my remarks, kind of de-risk some of these things. And I'd say with respect to authorities, I emphasize the importance of kind of working with the Hill on this. Also, obviously, agriculture and forestry would build this, and I think that's really important. Carbon is a commodity right now, and the CCC was built to help think about how we stabilize that and think about how we can work with producers to market them and do other things with commodities. So you think about kind of there was part of your question was about sort of philanthropy. They're big opportunities if we can figure out how we partner, and this is something you've already seen in RCPP and other Farm Bill programs is how can you leverage resources from the outside, and I think that's an important opportunity here for thinking about a tool like this. The question of resilience, and I'll close with this. There's going to be no kind of magic bullet for thinking about these. We're going to need a toolbox. Landowners are different, producers are different. They have different needs. They have different capacities. They've got their the different crop types, livestock, all that stuff. And so we need some flexibility. And as I think I said in my remarks, there's some producers that thinking about resilience, productivity are going to be the most valuable things. And USDA has a set of tools, but are to think about how do we create how do we enhance that set of tools so that producers have the best information and can tailor things to their own operations. So for some, whether it's a Farm Bill program or a bank or those may be the best options, but for others, there may be other things that have more value. And I think we need to think about what's the toolbox. And, again, thanks to the work of Lynn and Ann, there's a pretty good toolbox right now, but we might think about how we even enhance it further in the context of climate.
Yes, great. And I probably should have also led with this. There's discussion, we say carbon, but are we talking about livestock and manure and greenhouse gases, methane, nitrous oxide, yeah.
Yes.
We're all smiling. And I think I personally need to think of greenhouse gases, because when I say carbon, I'm only thinking of soil and cropland. So I take it you're thinking bigger as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the things when I was at USDA during the Obama administration, the secretary was very interested in dairy digesters and those type of approaches, and thinking about are there mechanisms to partner with the private sector to finance some of those things is a lot of interest. And you might think about building tools to do that. And the same thing on nitrous oxide. And if we can build some things that deal with sort of the uncertainty in measurement, but still provide some certainty there for producers in terms of their participation and their ability to do well under these types of tools, I think that's important.
So Ann, please provide your comments. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, you might be disappointed on this one. I think you saw a little bit the other day at Secretary Vilsack's hearing. I think members of Congress, senators are going to have a lot of questions about what are we going to use the carbon bank for? Is USDA going to hold the credits? Who's out there? It's like I said, it's been 12 years since we really had this debate in earnest. And there's a lot of new members, a lot of new staff, a lot of education that we're going to have to do on our end. I survived cap and trade. I was here for that. And, is that the mechanism? Is it going to be cap and trade? And again, I'm getting way out further than I thought I was going to let myself get. But there's a lot of questions yet about, again, I think some of our members are going to ask, why do we need a carbon bank? Who's going to buy the credits? All those questions still need to be asked.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We're having the same discussions at the AGree conversation that's underway. In fact, when we get off this call, we'll be having that very, very important discussion. Lynn, would you like to say more about this?
Sure, and I'll speak as a farmer, and the average age of the farmer is 55, and I'm way above average. But saying that, I mean, any type of program has to be something that's easy to understand. It has to be something that also the lending community has to be a part of, and something that I think when I look back at past programs, they seemed so complex. They also seemed like they were rewarding for practices that were already in place. We weren't really picking up that much of a net gain. So I think we need to look at that. But I think there's definitely a place for it, but and farmers would embrace it there once again if they can be convinced this is something that's going to be good for them economically, and their lender's going to support it, and it's going to be something I think then they'll get behind.
Great, thank you. Now I have another question for the group. So where do you think the data gaps are for some of these important tools that we're talking about? Let me go to you, Robert.
So, I mean, I think on the one hand, I think USDA has good data both on the forest side, on the agricultural side. But I think if we want to do this in a way that makes it easy for producers, we need to give them the best available information so they can make good decisions. You've got tools like Comet Farm and on the forestry side, FIA that do a pretty good job of this. But I think we can, we can think about those things even better. Obviously, some of the work that AGree's been doing to look at the relationship of practices to resilience. I think that's really important. There's so much work on precision ag. There's so much adoption of precision agriculture. What are the types of things that USDA can do to enhance the use of those tools? Because I think they not only can help producers be more productive, they can help their bottom line, they can help on the climate side as well. And so I think USDA figuring out how best we can leverage our own scientific resources and data to help that is going to be really important.
Excellent. Anne, please take a crack at this.
I'm just echo what Robert said. We've come a long way, and we've done, NRCS has done a lot of things. The USDA, with their other research agencies in conjunction with NRCS, has done CEAP as well, trying to get to the bottom of, showing what producers are able to do with different practices. As Robert mentioned too, the work that AGree is doing, we need to see more of that. I think one of our frustrations, at least my frustration during the last Farm Bill, was it wasn't clear who at USDA should be doing that, should be shepherding that. So again, I know that was one of our discussions during the Farm Bill is what agency should take the lead? Should it be the Secretary's office? Should it be the research agencies? Should it be NRCS? I'm assuming that's one of those issues that Robert will wade through as they get folks in place and figure out who's going to take the lead on that. And because that is one of the critical issues, as Kristin alluded to in her video and all the work that she's done. Farmers need to be shown or convinced that these practices are going to work. And obviously folks who care about what's going to happen, whether it's getting credits done, whatever kind of program ends up being, if there is one that's put in place that measures and or quantifies, folks who buy these, who are interested in the impacts and what we get out of it, are also going to want to know and need that assurance.
Yes, thank you. Lynn, from the farmer perspective.
Okay, well, from the farmer perspective, let's use a quarter of land, for example, and very few of us have a quarter that, say, is in central Iowa that is flat, heavy, deep soil, no erosion issues, no drainage issues, probably because tiling was done 50 years ago. But anyway, we've got that quarter of land, but on my farms in South Dakota, I've got some pretty diverse land, as most farms are. And, you know, we've put in cover crops. We've used wheat, corn, soybean rotation, put land in filter strips, WRP, and basically, so we're farming the very best land. But what I don't know, and I think what most farmers don't know is, okay, if I put in a cover crop, what cover crop works best in my area? Is a cover crop the best? Should I put a cover crop that far north on some of my row crop like soybeans and corn? Will that work? Is there any data to support that? Right now there isn't to know whether or not that's going to work. So I think from a common sense farmer perspective, it goes back to, you know, I'd like to see this list of practices that would be available to me, and that includes the current ones and some new ones as far as carbon programs, carbon type programs, and be able to put some dollars with them and know that if I plug this into my operation, this is what I can expect. I know these practices have enhanced my operation and have resulted in higher yields and better productivity and taking care of the soil, but how much? And should I have done something different, done something better?
Great answer, and thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you one last question before we wrap this up, and it's for all of you. What are your hopes for 2021? If there is one thing that we could accomplish this year, what would it be? Robert.
Well, I guess I would, you know, Ann and I and Lynn a little bit were working during the Waxman-Markey days, where this, you know, these issues became really hard for agriculture. There was a lot of uncertainty and concern. My hope is that we can have a conversation where we can actually build these things together. That we can build a toolbox that actually agriculture sees themselves, sees their needs in, that it's easy, it's not burdensome. And so I think that conversation is going to be really important as we think about this and sort of build the toolbox. And so that would be my hope. And the same thing on the forestry side, and on as it relates to folks in conservation community and elsewhere, that you know, we really think about building something that adds to agriculture and forestry's bottom line, that creates new options, that's workable, that that has, you know, low cost of entry, and so building that and building support for it is really my hope, and doing this as a collaborative, or in as a collaborative a way as we can.
Great. Ann.
I guess one thing, if I could wish for one thing in 2021, related to this topic, it's been really frustrating to watch over $40 billion. Obviously, it's been needed in the ag economy. It's done a lot of good in the ag economy. It's also led to some, again, unintended consequences in the ag economy with land values and things like that happening. But it's been frustrating for those of us who work on ag policy, whether it's commodity title, conservation title, that all of that money that flowed out did nothing to build this baseline and help us in the long term with our farm bill programs, knowing that the interest there is in the farm bill programs, the energy title programs where we lost baseline. So I'm hoping whatever exercise may happen this year, that we can do something that will help build baseline for agriculture for the long term in our farm bill, whether it's, again, commodity title safety net, the conservation title, energy title, getting any mandatory money we can for research on these topics.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Lynn.
First of all, one thing, being a former county executive director for first ASCS and then FSA, both in South Dakota and Nebraska, And I'm on a Facebook page that is USDA employees. And I think one of the most critical needs out there is adequate staffing in the county offices. You know, you can have the best program in the world, and if it's not administered properly out in the field or with adequate help, it doesn't do justice to the farmers and ranchers that those programs are designed for. And I think, and especially after this past year with all these ad hoc programs, I mean, those folks were really slammed. You can tell just by, I mean, to the point of I think really being hurtful to them and their attitude towards work. So, you know, that would be my goal for 2021, is that we can get more help out in the county offices. I know how valuable they are to me, and I know, having been a CED and seeing farmers come in and talk to the ladies and men at the front desk saying, what should I do with this? What should I do with that? What should I do with these acres? I mean, they come in and they expect answers. I had one employee one time told the producer, you don't want me to tell you what I think you should do with your ACR acres. So, you know, I think that just shows what level of dependency there is. And even with crop insurance agents, you know, the advice that they're giving. But overall, 2021, I really have high hopes for the administration. Robert, like I said, helpful to know that you're there, and I know some of the great programs. I remember when I was working at USDA with you, and went up to Pennsylvania with Dallas Tonsiger and a group, and there was a dairy farm there where they were rural development and cost shared methane digesters, and this farm had an incredible operation where they were using the methane digesters. They were creating and selling their own electricity, generating electricity, and then also using the dry matter, selling that as compost. And I think that's a classic example of what can be done, and hopefully we can see more of that coming up.
Great. Well, thank you. This was a wonderful discussion. I really appreciate your time and energy. The AGree coalition and dialogue groups, we hope to be working with you over the course of the next year, if not several years. So again, thank you. I think the idea of having resources, having a toolbox, and having technical assistance, and just a positive word, we can build this and do the right thing, if you will, to improve and incentivize climate smart agriculture. So thank you all who listened in for the past hour. So take care and stay sane and healthy. So bye-bye.